You wake before sunrise with another person's arm across your legs, a child breathing beside your shoulder, and half the camp only a few steps away. There is no bedroom door, no bathroom lock, no hallway to disappear into. So how could ancient humans possibly have had a private life? The first answer is uncomfortable. By modern standards, they often had very little physical privacy. Mobile groups usually lived close together because closeness meant warmth, protection, shared food, and fast help when danger appeared. Being alone could be more frightening than being watched. The privacy is not only a wall, it can also be distance, darkness, timing, silence, and an agreement not to pay attention. Ancient people may not have possessed private rooms, yet they could still create private moments through the way they organized space and behaved around one another. Archaeology cannot show us embarrassment, jealousy, or the moment someone politely looked away. Those behaviors leave no fossil. What archaeology can reveal is where people slept, where they worked, where they built fires, and how carefully they separated one activity from another. At the Neanderthal site of Riparo Bombrini, Italy, researchers found that living space was not random. Different parts of the rock shelter were used in different ways. Tools and animal remains clustered in activity zones, while other areas were kept comparatively clear. A similar pattern appears at Oscurusciuto in southern Italy. A line of hearths divided the shelter into an outer working area and an inner zone near the wall. Because that inner zone contained far fewer discarded objects, researchers have interpreted it as a possible place for sleeping or resting. At Abric Romaní in Spain, a remarkable Neanderthal floor preserved several small fire areas spaced roughly a meter apart. Researchers suggested that these hearth-centered patches may have functioned as separate sleeping and resting units inside a larger shared shelter. That does not prove each person had a personal bedroom. It suggests something more flexible, small clusters within the group. A couple, a parent with children, or close relatives may have slept around their own fire while still remaining inside the safety of the wider camp. The fire itself created a boundary. Near the flames, faces, hands, tools, and food were visible. Beyond the bright circle, bodies faded into shadow. At night, privacy may have begun only a few steps from everyone else, wherever firelight could no longer clearly reach. Darkness, however, was not an empty room. Predators, rough ground, cold air, and unfamiliar sounds waited beyond the camp. Anyone seeking solitude had to balance privacy against safety. The farther you moved from the group, the more private you became and the more vulnerable. Sleeping arrangements probably changed with weather, danger, age, and season. On a freezing night, people may have packed together under hides. In warm weather, they could spread farther apart. Privacy was not a permanent possession. It expanded and contracted with survival conditions. At Sibudu rock shelter in South Africa, people were making plant bedding about 77,000 years ago. Layers of sedges were topped with aromatic leaves that may have helped repel insects. These were not careless piles of grass, they were prepared living surfaces. A clean bedding patch could mark a temporary personal or family zone. Your tools might sit near one edge, a hide could cover the sleeping surface. Children might recognize where their parents usually rested. There was no lock, but there could still be a socially understood place that others did not casually occupy. Some barriers were probably almost invisible to archaeology. Branch screens, hanging hides, brush windbreaks, and light wooden frames decay quickly. We should not assume every ancient shelter was one completely open room simply because soft partitions disappear while stone tools survived. Still, thin hides would block sight better than sound. Ancient privacy was probably more visual than acoustic. A screen could hide a body, an injury, breastfeeding, grooming, or intimacy, but voices, movement, and laughter would still travel through the shelter. This means private life depended heavily on manners. People could hear something without reacting to it. They could turn toward the fire, continue working, move to another place, or pretend not to notice. Social privacy begins when a group agrees that not everything witnessed must become everyone's business. What about romance and sex? Here the evidence becomes especially thin. Archaeologists can study bodies, genes, ornaments, and settlement patterns, but intimate behavior almost never survives. We cannot honestly reconstruct one universal prehistoric rule for courtship or privacy. Different groups almost certainly had different expectations. A couple might walk beyond the main activity area, wait until others slept, use a small shelter, or simply live in a culture where certain forms of intimacy were less hidden than they are in many societies today. The important point is that modesty is cultural, not a fixed architectural requirement. A person can feel exposed inside a locked modern room or respected in an open camp, depending on who is present and what the group believes should remain unspoken. Bodily functions created another problem. There was no private toilet and almost no direct evidence showing exactly where most Paleolithic people relieved themselves. Ancient feces survive only under unusual conditions, although preserved coprolites can reveal diet, parasites, and health. The safest reconstruction is simple rather than dramatic. People could move away from sleeping and food areas, use vegetation or terrain for cover, and choose moments when others were occupied. This would reduce smell and contamination, while also creating a brief form of privacy. Bathing and grooming were probably social as often as private. Removing lice, checking wounds, cleaning skin, and combing hair can strengthen relationships. What looks intensely personal to you might have been normal cooperative care between relatives and trusted companions. Even pain was not fully private. A serious wound, difficult birth, fever, or disability affected the whole group because everyone depended on one another. Ancient people may have had fewer opportunities to hide weakness, but they also had less reason to face every crisis alone. Children probably grew up surrounded by adult life. They watched tools being made, food being divided, arguments settled, injuries treated, and babies cared for. Knowledge did not stay behind closed doors. The lack of privacy helped turn daily life into a continuous classroom, yet people still had inner lives. Personal ornaments, pigments, engravings, and carefully shaped objects show attention to identity and meaning. These things were often displayed publicly, but the memories and emotions attached to them could remain known only to the person who carried them. A bead can be visible to everyone while its meaning stays private. A scar may tell one story to the group and another to the person who survived it. Ancient privacy was not always control over who saw your body. Sometimes it was control over what others understood. There was also privacy through movement. Hunter-gatherers did not spend every hour in one crowded shelter. People gathered plants, fetched water, checked traps, collected wood, tracked animals, and visited nearby places. Daily tasks naturally created periods with only one or two companions. Solitude may have existed at the edge of ordinary work, a quiet walk to a water source, time watching animals, or a pause while gathering fuel. But complete isolation was probably unusual and risky. The private self developed within relationships, not apart from them. This leads to the counterintuitive twist. Ancient humans may have had less privacy of space, but more privacy from permanent observation. No camera recorded where you walked, no written file followed you. No device preserved every message, search, mistake, or argument. Your campmates might know when you were angry, sick, attracted to someone, or avoiding work. Their knowledge was immediate and personal, but it usually ended with living memory. Modern people can close a door while leaving a detailed digital trail far beyond the room. So the difference is not simply ancient exposure versus modern privacy. Ancient life made bodies and behavior visible to a small trusted network. Modern life can hide the body while exposing habits to strangers, institutions, and systems you never meet. If you lived in a Paleolithic camp, your private life would not begin when you entered a room. It would begin when someone gave you space near the wall, turned away beside the fire, lowered their voice, or understood that a moment belonged to you. Privacy was temporary, negotiated, and fragile. It came from shadows, distance, bedding places, small shelters, daily movement, and social trust. Ancient humans did not need modern walls to recognize personal boundaries. They simply built those boundaries out of different materials, and perhaps that is the most familiar part of all. A private life has never depended only on architecture. It depends on whether the people around you know when to come closer and when to look away. If you enjoyed this journey into the distant past, subscribe for more stories about ancient humans and human evolution.